A man runs through the wilderness of Beersheba with a stolen birthright in his pocket and a murder threat ringing in his ears. We are a modern species desperate for direction, constantly begging God to speak to our conscious minds, own sleep cycles for the direction we crave. You sit in your car with the engine running, feeling the anxiety tightening in your chest, wondering if the bizarre sequence you saw last night was God telling you to quit your job, end a relationship, or move to a new city. We treat the dream as a mystical puzzle we are supposed to solve. But when you measure our modern obsession against the actual geography and function of the scriptural dream, the contrast is jarring. You begin to realize that the people in the text were never asking for these nighttime visitations. They were not attempting to cultivate a spiritual state that would induce a vision. They were not waking up and analyzing the metaphors of their own psychology to discover their authentic selves. The biblical dream is not a spiritual horoscope. It is a sovereign disruption. When you look at the patriarchs, the prophets, and the pagan kings, you see men who were completely overwhelmed by the invasion of the divine voice. The dreams recorded in the text did not bring them comforting affirmations about their personal journeys. The dreams brought them terrifying clarity, geopolitical warnings, and heavy mandates that required them to radically alter their physical realities the moment the sun came up. If you are in a season where you find yourself constantly chasing signs in the dark, you might be avoiding the clear commands. Most people read these ancient stories and assume biblical dreams were a reward for the ultra-spiritual. We picture prophets fasting in holy temples, already given to you in the daylight. You might be asking the creator of the universe to give you a secret, personalized revelation, because the mundane reality of daily obedience feels too heavy to carry. We beg for the dramatic intervention of the midnight vision, forgetting that the men who actually received them woke up trembling, displaced, and often running for their lives. God does not use the dream to entertain the spiritually bored. He uses it to redirect the dangerously blind. And the final time, the scriptural, God uses a dream to send an urgent warning. He does not send it to a prophet, a patriarch, or a carpenter. He drops it directly into the center of a Roman political crisis, into the mind of a woman whose name we do not even know. The sun beats down on the stone pavement of the Praetorium. The air smells of sweat, dust, and raw, feral anger. The mob screams for blood. Pontius Pilate sits on the judgment seat, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the heavy stone arms of his chair. He is a man caught between a political riot and a kingdom he cannot comprehend. He is about to pass a sentence of execution on a bruised, bleeding rabbi from Nazareth. And then, a messenger pushes through the heavy bronze doors. He brings a note from the inner chambers, perfectly aligned with the divine will, peacefully receiving a midnight vision as a badge of their elevated status. He brings a message from the governor's wife. Matthew chapter 27, verse 19. Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream. Matthew uses the exact same word he used for Joseph, an onar, a heavy, commanding, terrifying directive. While the religious leaders plotted in the daylight, she was wrestling in the dark, while the soldiers twisted a branch of thorns into a crown. Her subconscious was being violently invaded by a holy terror. While her husband washed his hands in a bronze basin to absolve himself of the murder, she was waking up in a cold sweat, carrying the spiritual weight of the moment that the waking world entirely missed. Look at the staggering irony of this moment. The men who spent their entire lives memorizing the scriptures are standing in the courtyard demanding the death of the author. The disciples who walked with him for 3 years have scattered into the alleys. The entire religious apparatus is completely blind to what is happening. So God bypasses the high priest. He bypasses the Roman governor. He bypasses the temple and the altar and the holy city entirely. He walks straight into the sleeping mind of a pagan Roman woman resting on silk sheets, and he hands her the undeniable truth. We treat the biblical dream like a spiritual achievement. But if you look closer at the text at who actually receives these nighttime visitations, The men holding the sacred scrolls missed the Messiah. The woman holding Roman citizenship felt the weight of his innocence. The dream is not a polite suggestion. It is a divine indictment. She sees what the religious elite are blind to. She feels the terror that Pilate is trying to ignore. She recognizes the absolute righteousness that the crowd is screaming to crucify. The final recorded dream in the gospel narrative is not given to a believer to launch a ministry. It is given to an outsider to stand as a witness against an entire corrupt system. Pilate ignores the note. He crushes the parchment. He hands the rabbi over to the soldiers with the whips. The cross is raised. The sky turns black. And the heavy curtain. In the temple, tears from top to bottom. But after the resurrection, after the birth of the early church, after the Spirit falls, like fire on the believers, something profound shifts in the biblical record. The midnight visitations begin to vanish. And the reason why they stop changes everything about how we are meant to listen in the daylight. Scan the letters of Paul, Peter, and John. You are looking at thousands of words written by men who are building a new faith in hostile territory. And at the exact physical and emotional state they are in, when their eyes close, you start to see a system that shatters, dodging Roman swords and hiding from religious mobs. You can almost smell the ink drying on the papyrus as they write desperate instructions to isolated believers. And as you read through these foundational documents, you will notice a staggering, almost deafening absence. The dreams have disappeared for thousands of years. The heavy Tardima and the urgent Onar were the emergency frequencies of the divine, when the patriarchs were wandering the desert, when the prophets were locked in foreign prisons. When the physical temple was miles away, God invaded the dark to bypass the isolated, conscious mind. But after the wind sweeps through the upper room in Acts chapter 2, the communication architecture of the entire biblical narrative fundamentally changes. To understand why the midnight visitations fade away, you have to look at what replaced them. In the ancient world, the presence of God was geographical. It was localized. It was contained in a wooden box covered in gold, hidden behind a thick veil of woven fabric, or resting as a physical cloud of smoke over a stone altar. If you were separated from that physical geography, God had to cross the border of your subconscious to reach you. But the resurrection and the subsequent arrival of the Holy Spirit completely dismantled that geography. The temple is no longer a building sitting on a hill in Jerusalem. That entire assumption. The dreams of the Bible are not a reward for the righteous. They are an intervention for the desperate. The temple is the human chest. The Spirit of God does not just visit the human mind in the vulnerability of sleep. It takes up permanent, waking residence inside the believer. The silence of the night is not a divine withdrawal. It is the proof of an internal residency. Paul does not need to be knocked unconscious in a Tardima to hear from God, because the Spirit is actively whispering to his conscious mind, while he sits awake on the cold floor of a Philippian jail. We are no longer required to wait for the sun to go down to receive direction, because the emergency frequency has been replaced by an open, unceasing line of waking communion. God no longer has to bypass our defenses, because he has already moved inside the walls. We spend so much time begging God to speak to us in our sleep, looking for an Onar to give us a shortcut, that we entirely miss the profound privilege of the daylight. The ancient kings and prophets would have traded every terrifying midnight vision they ever had just to possess what is currently sitting quietly inside your waking chest. But that does not erase the weight of the dark. Because when you gather every dream, every trance, and every midnight warning across the centuries, a single, undeniable picture remains. To feel the weight of this pattern, you have to look at the architecture of human sleep. When you are awake, your defenses are up. A fleeing deceiver slept on a jagged stone and woke up to a staircase touching the dust. A betrayed son closed his eyes in a damp Egyptian prison and was handed the blueprints to save an empire. A desperate patriarch fell under a paralyzing trance in the heat of the desert, and an eternal covenant was forged entirely without his help. The pagan emperors of the ancient world went to sleep guarded by bronze spears and were brought to their knees by the fragility of their own reigns. A quiet carpenter wrestled with his shame in the cold air of Nazareth and woke up carrying the tactical command to save the Son of God. A group of foreign stargazers closed their eyes in Bethlehem and were diverted away from a king's murderous rage. A Roman governor's wife rested on silk sheets during a political riot and received the final indictment against a corrupt religious system. Same darkness, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is that jagged stone under Jacob's head. He did not find a sanctuary. He did not build an altar. He was at the absolute lowest point of his life, running from the wreckage he had caused with his own 2 hands, entirely exposed to the elements of the desert night. Your ego is active. Your anxiety is managing the perimeter. You are calculating, planning, running, or fighting. But when the body shuts down, and those were the exact coordinates where the heavens tore open, not in the temple, in the dirt. If you are in a season where you feel completely cut off from the divine voice, if the familiar structures of your faith have collapsed, and you feel like you are wandering in a wilderness of your own making, do not panic in the silence. You do not need to decipher the chaotic static of your own REM sleep to find His will. You do not need a midnight vision to prove that He is speaking. The God who crossed borders to reach captives in Babylon has already taken up residence inside your waking chest. The Spirit does not need you to be unconscious to guide you. He just asks you to listen in the daylight. And may the God who has never once abandoned an exile to the dark walk with you through your wilderness and give you the courage to follow His voice when the sun comes up. The walls fall. The conscious resistance collapses. The hands open. And that is exactly the moment the scriptural God chooses to step into the room, to find the answer to why God speaks in the dark. You cannot start in the holy places. The sun drops fast behind the red cliffs. He has no tent. He has no fire. He has no weapons. The journey begins with the realization that out of the dozens of dreams recorded in the text, almost none of them happen in a temple. Almost none of them happen during a religious ceremony. But the detail that changes how you read every single nighttime visitation in the Bible is the physical location of the sleeper. And there is a geographic thread hiding in plain sight that changes everything. Picture Joseph in an Egyptian dungeon. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and unwashed bodies. The darkness broken only by the sound of bronze chains scraping against cold stone. He is miles away from the rolling hills of Canaan, stripped of his colorful coat, his familial status, and his very name. He closes his eyes in a foreign cell, entirely cut off from the land of his fathers. Now look at a map of the scriptural text. We naturally assume that divine revelation requires holy ground sanctuaries dripping with the scent of burning frankincense, altars stained with the blood of sacrifice, or designated holy cities where the righteous gather. But when you track the exact coordinates of the dreams God actually sends, a radically different map begins to emerge. Jacob dreams while fleeing for his life through the empty desert. Joseph dreams and interprets the midnight visions of others while suffocating in the grip of Egyptian slavery. The royal cupbearer and the baker dream while locked in a maximum security political prison. Nebuchadnezzar dreams in thee. He finds a clearing, picks up a literal, jagged stone from the cooling dirt, places it under his head, and closes his eyes. Heart of the Babylonian Empire, surrounded by the towering ziggurats of pagan deities. Daniel receives his sweeping night visions while living as an assimilated captive under a hostile regime. There is a staggering consistency to where the sleep cycle becomes a conduit for the divine voice. The dream is not a sanctuary phenomenon. It is a wilderness protocol. When the ancient Israelites were standing safely in the courts of Jerusalem, they had the physical scrolls of the Torah, the ornate garments of the priesthood, and the waking prophets standing in the daylight to declare the parameters of reality. But when that nation is dragged away, into exile, when the gold is stripped from the temple doors and the familiar structures of faith are burned to ash, the waking voices suddenly go violently quiet. In the darkness of foreign captivity, the rules of communication must immediately shift. When the physical connection to the sacred space is severed, God simply bypasses the earthly geography altogether, and invades the subconscious architecture of the outcast. Dreams, in the biblical narrative, are the communication method of last resort for the geographically and spiritually isolated. They are the emergency frequency. When a human being has no access to a priest, no access to a stone altar, and no access to a stabilizing community of faith, the Creator of the universe does not abandon them to the silence. He simply waits for the sun to go down and their eyes to close. The geography of the dream proves that God will cross any border to reach an isolated mind. But the physiological, Jacob is terrified. He is completely exposed. And then, the heavens tear open. A staircase touches the dust. Celestial beings move between the dirt and the divine. Condition of the sleeper reveals something far more profound about what God is actually trying to shut down. Abram stands in the dirt. Carcasses lie cut in half. The smell of split flesh and hot blood hangs heavy in the fading heat. Vultures circle in the darkening sky. He waves his arms. He shouts. He beats the air. He fights the scavengers off to protect the sacrifice. He is completely exhausted. The sun finally drops below the hills. He collapses into the dust. Genesis chapter 15, verse 12. God is about to make the foundational covenant of the entire biblical narrative. He is about to promise a nation. He is about to promise land. He is about to forge a binding legal contract with humanity. And right before the fire passes between the pieces of meat, God does something deeply strange. The text says, "A deep sleep falls upon Abram." The English phrase sounds peaceful. It sounds restorative, but the word the text uses here is the Hebrew tardama. It appears just 7 times in the Old Testament. Tardama is not a nap. It is not natural fatigue. It is a divinely induced, heavy, paralyzing trance. It is a state of utter physical and mental vulnerability where the conscious mind is completely deactivated. It is the exact same word used in Genesis 2. The voice of the Creator of the universe speaks massive, sweeping promises over a man who just hours ago scammed his own blind father. God drops a tardama on Adam to pull a rib from his side. It is the exact same word used in 1 Samuel 26. A tardama falls over King Saul's entire army, freezing 3,000 armed men in the dirt, so David can walk right through their camp untouched. That route changes everything. Abram is a manager. He is a fixer. He is a man who constantly tries to secure his own legacy. He builds his own wealth. He fights his own wars. If Abram is awake, he will try to help God forge this contract. He will try to negotiate the terms. He will try to walk through the blood path himself, binding his own fragile, flawed obedience to the eternal promise. God cannot let that happen. The tardama is an intervention. It is a disable switch. God paralyzes the patriarch to ensure the covenant rests solely on divine faithfulness, not human performance. The sleep is not a consequence of physical exhaustion. It is a theological necessity. God knocks the human manager unconscious so the divine hand can work uninterrupted. But this heavy, paralyzing darkness does not only fall on the people who love God. Sometimes, the dream invades the minds of the men who think they actually rule the world. There is a profound irony in the ancient world. The men with the most waking power are the most defenseless in the dark. It happens to Jacob on a rock. It happens to a teenage boy whose older brothers are actively plotting his murder. We tend to view the empires of antiquity through the lens of their military might. Pharaoh rules over the Nile, guarded by walls of chariots, and priests chanting incantations. Nebuchadnezzar sits atop Babylon, surrounded by massive gold-plated doors, hanging gardens, and the greatest army the ancient world has ever seen. Nobody walks into the throne room of these emperors without an invitation. Nobody speaks to them without permission. They are treated as literal deities walking the earth, entirely insulated from challenge, correction, or consequence. But that insulation only works when the sun is up. When the emperors go to sleep, the armies are utterly useless. The guards standing outside the royal bedchamber with bronze spears cannot protect the king from the imagery invading his own skull. The conscious mind of the dictator shuts down. The ego that demands worship is temporarily deactivated, and God simply walks right past the heavily armed perimeter and shatters their false reality. The dreams of the emperors are not signs of divine favor. They are acts of divine trespassing. God sends Pharaoh a vision of emaciated cows eating the fat cattle, carrying the stench of rotting grain right into the perfumed royal chamber. He sends Nebuchadnezzar the image of a towering statue being pulverized to dust by a single, uncut rock. These men control millions of lives. Yet, they wake up in a cold sweat, their hearts pounding against their ribs, utterly terrified by a truth. It happens to a pagan king resting on a golden bed in Babylon. It happens to a quiet carpenter in Nazareth wrestling. They cannot control and cannot even understand without the help of a Hebrew captive. If something about this systemic pattern is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the pagan kings wake up trembling. God breaks the arrogance of emperors by showing them the absolute fragility of their empires. He uses the sleep cycle to remind the men who think they are gods that they are merely dust. The kings are stripped of their sovereignty the moment their heads hit the pillow. But this divine trespassing is not always about humbling empires. Sometimes, the invasion of the subconscious has nothing to do with global politics. The pagan kings were warned of shifting powers and coming famines, but the most urgent warning ever delivered in the dark was handed to a quiet man with calloused hands. Joseph lies on his mat. The wood shavings still cling to his clothes. The air in Nazareth is cold. His chest is tight. His reputation is gone. The woman he loves is pregnant. The child is not his. He makes a quiet, devastating choice. He will divorce her. He will spare her the stones. He will carry the shame himself. He closes his eyes. He is a broken man, simply trying to survive the wreckage of his life. Then, the dark breaks, with the shame of a pregnant fiancée. It happens to a Roman governor's wife while a political trial rages in the courtyard. Matthew, chapter 1, verse 20. An angel of the Lord steps into the subconscious architecture of the carpenter. Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid. The text says, this happens in a dream. The word Matthew uses here is the Greek onar. It is a highly specific term. It appears exactly 6 times in the entire New Testament. All 6 are in the Gospel of Matthew. All 6 are wrapped tightly around the birth and survival of Jesus. Onar is not a gentle vision. It is not an abstract spiritual metaphor. In the ancient Greek world, an onar is a heavy, commanding dream. It is an urgent directive. It carries the weight of impending danger. Watch how Matthew uses it. The Magi are warned in an onar to avoid King Herod. Joseph is warned in an onar to grab the baby and flee to Egypt immediately. He is warned in an onar that the king is dead. He is warned in an onar to avoid Judea. Same word, same function. The onar is not a devotional thought. It is an evacuation order. God does not send Joseph this dream to heal his broken heart. He sends it to move his physical feet. The dream is not a theology lesson. It is a tactical directive. Herod is sharpening bronze swords. Soldiers are saddling war horses. A slaughter is coming to the dirt streets of Bethlehem. The conscious mind of the carpenter cannot possibly know. Same thing, again and again. God, bypassing the conscious, waking mind to drop a message into the dark. The political machinations happening 50 miles away in the capital. His waking perimeter is completely blind to the threat. So God bypasses the waking ignorance. He uses the sleep cycle as an emergency alert system. He drops the tactical command directly into the onar. Joseph wakes up. He does not write down a prophecy. He does not start a ministry. He packs his tools in the dark, wakes his teenage wife, and runs for the border. The scriptural dream always demands a physical obedience. But modern believers have completely forgotten the urgency of the anar. And we have replaced the biblical emergency alert system with something much more self-centered. You wake up in the morning, the heavy fog of sleep still clinging to your mind, and you reach immediately for the glowing screen of your phone. You type frantic questions into a search bar while your coffee goes cold on the kitchen counter. You are desperately trying to decode the fragmented imagery of a crumbling house, a falling tooth, or a faceless figure in the dark. We fill our nightstands with dream dictionaries, entirely convinced that God is hiding cryptic messages about our personal fulfillment inside the chaotic static of our REM sleep. We treat our own subconscious as a personalized oracle. We are a generation that feels profoundly disconnected from the divine voice in our waking hours. So we attempt to mine our cod.